The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week by two excellent co-hosts.
Nate Heininger. And Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about a very, very hotly anticipated short game. We are talking this week about the latest game from Short Game All-Star Sam Barlow, and this game is called Immortality.
Yes.
And I've been looking forward to this for a long time, but like every Sam Barlow game we have ever played, it was incredibly surprising to me on almost every level.
Every time we play a Sam Barlow game, I have the feeling of I've never played anything like this before, or even really thought that something like this could exist. And this game is by far the most I have felt that in a game before.
Well, we're just popping off with love for Sam Barlow. Like, the first time Sam Barlow did one of these, I was delighted that someone was bringing back, this corny FMV game genre. The second time that he made just an incredible work of art, I was like, wow, there's really something to this. But now I'm like, oh, Sam Barlow for the, I don't know, filmmaking Hall of Fame? I don't know. This is just incredible.
Greatest of all time. Insane work of genius. He has done it again in a way that I could not possibly have expected.
And we should say friend of the show. We don't get a lot of...
He's an old buddy,
yeah?
Yeah. What Nate is referring to is that, back when he wasn't such a big deal, he came on and did a really nice interview. If you go back and listen to our Her Story episode, back in, what was that event, 2015, episode 51 like that, of The Short Game, he came on and did a really nice interview. I don't think I could book him today. He's too important to video games. But yeah, really, really incredible. So if you are maybe not familiar with his work, I just want to set up the previous two games in his oeuvre, or in this part of his work. Her Story and Telling Lies. They're both sort of famous. Her Story especially because it made such waves back in 2015. But Her Story, if you haven't played that one, very briefly, is a FMV game, like Shane was mentioning. It's a game in which you are playing as, I guess, it's been a little while, so I may get some of the finer points a little off here, and I don't remember exactly what counts as a spoiler. You are playing as a police investigator of some sort who is using a basically kind of broken computer system to look at interview tapes from suspect interviews with a woman who is telling you the story of the death of, or being interviewed by the police about the death of her husband. But the quirk of the interface is that you can search the text of the interviews and pull up clips, but you can't just watch them in order. So you're sort of forced to watch them out of order by typing searches into this slightly broken computer system.
They're also fragmented, so the videos have been broken into pieces, so you're never finding even an entire video to watch.
You never hear the questions. It's only the responses that are recorded as clips, and so you don't know what questions she's being asked, and you only get like one response at a time. But you do get things like dates on the clips. And the incredible thing about this is that there's a story, of course, which is trying to piece together in order what this woman said to the police detectives over a series of interviews across a number of days. But there is sort of a larger story that you're uncovering through finer details and by finding clips that aren't immediately apparent, because you might go into a story like that and search for things like gun or murder or body, but there are things that you can search for that will turn up sort of orphaned clips within this database that tell you more about the situation and characters than that reveal really interesting and fascinating things. And it was a really huge step forward, not just for FMV. Like, obviously FMV was the medium here. This is a game that was telling its story through recorded videos with actors and writing and production values. But it was also a really interesting new territory for interactive fiction. The format, this idea of like searching through almost at random and trying to piece together a narrative from fragmentary pieces, was pretty revolutionary with Her Story. And that has been the through line that he's carried through the rest of his career. The second game that kind of follow up to Her Story, which came out in 2019, was Telling Lies, which changed from this perspective of looking at a singular character. He got a larger cast. There were, I think, at least 4 or 5 actors involved in Telling Lies. It told a much larger and more complete story. But in that case, it had a similar presentation where you were watching clips presented out of order. There, it had a whole computer interface that you were interacting with that was a little more complete than the sort of police database you were interacting with in Her Story. But in Telling Lies, you were watching recordings of video calls, which meant that you were getting calls between people where they were talking to each other. Still very similar to Her Story in the way that you play it, but a different kind of story, different kinds of characters, still a sort of crime story in a way, but really an interesting sort of thriller story.
I think it's, the format is incredibly compelling. Just the act of sifting through these, people talking to each other, or, in Her Story, just a police interrogation, that in of itself is a compelling and strange sort of interaction that I think drives a lot of the game. But I think what drives it even more, though, is just the actual stories that are being told. Like the plots that you're trying to piece together are also so densely packed and interesting and confusing.
One of the things that's been very cool about the way that Sam Barlow has created his games is they fall into this kind of tiny sliver of a subgenre. I don't even know if it has a proper name, but I've always sometimes thought of it as interface games, where you're playing through what would ordinarily be the interface of something. Think about the games like A Normal Lost Phone that came out way back in like 2017 or so. Mm-hmm. These kinds of games.
I think of Hypnospace Outlaw as being in the same genre, in that like it's a game where you're discovering a story by interacting with a computer system.
Mm-hmm. And that's very much kind of the space that Sam Barlow's game designs play in. They are all about presenting a story that you navigate through kind of independently and choose your own path through.
Yeah, it's like a walking simulator, except you're clicking instead of walking.
Yes. And if we can talk about the UI and the presentation of or perhaps a short history of Marissa Marcel, I can get into a little bit about how this one is presented, which I think is a good on-ramp.
I think that might be a good first thing to start, but just the bare bones description of Immortality. Immortality, obviously, latest game by Sam Barlow. We're all very excited to play it. This is and also thanks to the publisher or developer Half Mermaid, which is Sam Barlow's new company name, which I think is new for this game, for sharing pre-release codes with us on this one, which is letting us get our episode out close to release date. I also wanted to mention right off the bat that this is going to be one where we are going to split it into 2 episodes, because there is so much to talk about with Immortality. Just, we did a single episode on Her Story, a single episode on Telling Lies, talked for half an hour about the basics, and then dove into spoiler territory, that kind of thing. Here, impossible. There's just too much to say. So what we're going to be doing this time around is this episode, no spoiler break. This is a spoiler-free zone. We are going to be talking only about the way this game tells its story, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that so the developer was kind enough to share some details about what they consider spoilers. We're honoring all of that and maybe being a little conservative there because there's a lot to discover in terms of story here. So we're going to be sharing only things that we think are just straight up generalities and things that are not going to spoil the story for you in this episode. Next episode is going to be spoiler central.
We're getting deep. Yep.
Yeah. So I think in general, the stuff that we're going to be hitting in this episode, you probably could experience in the first hour of playing, because this game gives you a tremendous amount of freedom in terms of just kind of a real lateral entry. You can basically pick up from nearly anywhere in the story, which is fantastic. But of course, it wouldn't be a interface game if we didn't talk about how you get into it and what you see first and what you learn first, which is quite curated. I think this is a game that starts you off with an excellent and very thematic loading and menu experience. So just to kind of start us off, what you first see when you open this game is you see a young woman who is kind of walking towards a chair, and you've got a little bit of a menu, and you can
it's a DVD box set menu.
Yeah,
it just
this
looks
is exactly right.
It's 4x3. It looks like a late 90s, early 2000s DVD menu, and I think that's I think it's very intentional. It's obviously this is a game about films. We didn't mention that at the very beginning as part of the setup. I just want to read the 3-sentence Steam description here, which I think tells the story of what kind of game this is a little bit. Marissa Marcel was a film star. She made 3 movies, but none of the movies were ever released. And Marissa Marcel disappeared. An interactive trilogy from Sam Barlow, creator of Her Story.
Yes. So from that first menu, you get to see what is, I think, a really interesting touch is as you navigate the menu, you're seeing Marissa Marcel herself walk towards this sort of screen test chair. And so that's your very first introduction to the character, and you have the word immortality. And then you've got 2 things that it's presenting you with that are before you start the game at all. The content warning and the about screen. And both of these are kind of written in an in-universe sort of way. This does kind of carry on that DVD box set aesthetic. I think of this as, in terms of that DVD box set, for those who might not have been huge DVD collectors way back in I think that's starting to get into the distant past. If you paid good money for a fancy edition of a DVD, in many cases you would have something that was a really creative UI experience. I think particularly of some movies for me, my favorite of these was what's that David Fincher movie that's told out of sequence with the memory issues?
Oh,
Memento.
That's
Memento. Thank you.
that's not David
Nolan.
Fincher, is it? That's
isn't it?
That's oh geez. Googling Memento director.
Wait, it's Christopher Nolan.
That's Christopher Nolan. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
I got my wires crossed there. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that there were these weird depths that you could get to in those DVD menus that would unlock content that you wouldn't be able to see any other way. For example, a chronological version of the movie and other stuff like that. So that was cool. There was people were really experimenting at that time, and this has that same experimental feel. But before we get into what you actually
a good DVD menu, though, my nostalgic memory of a DVD menus also meant that if you fell asleep watching a movie, you would wake up to whatever the looped audio that was the backing track for the DVD menu, which would just play indefinitely. At least my DVD player didn't have any sort of power save mode or any ability to recognize that it's been sitting on the
and God help you if the DVD menu has some kind of loud sound in it. Because often they would be like, here's an explosion that launches the DVD options onto the screen. That's going to happen every 15 seconds while you're idling.
I distinctly remember renting the DVD for Barton Fink, and the DVD menu for that one was literally the climax of the film playing on repeat.
Jesus.
John Goodman walking through a burning hotel, and the whole time you're like, and he's like, Barton! And then it loops, and you're like, well, now I fucking know what that guy's gonna do.
Yeah, I think I had the old school one, and it was just Will Ferrell like screaming, and I wake up at 3 a.m. like, why is Will Ferrell screaming in my bedroom?
Well, it is worth telling our viewers and listeners up front the stuff that's in the content warning for this game, which basically says, viewers are warned that the film footage collected here contains subject matter that might be upsetting. The stories are taken from gothic, thriller, and supernatural genres and tackle themes and elements such as strong curse words, blasphemy regarding the Catholic faith, sudden and surprising visual cuts and sound effects, alcohol, cigarette, and drug use, abusive relationships, nudity, sex, blood and wounding, suicide, sexual assault, and murder, specifically asphyxia, knife, and firearm. So they get that. First off, I mean, you had me at hello. You had me at strong curse words.
It is a very intriguing list of warnings.
But I will say also for listeners, like this is a good example of a content warning. It's presented kind of in a unobtrusive, kind of in-universe way that kind of fits with the content, and it is exhaustive. These are exactly the things that I like about this film.
Yeah, man.
Well, it is kind of compelling because it's
the blasphemy about the Catholic faith is pretty fucking kick-ass in this.
But then there is the about screen, which tells us why we're really interested in this. And this is I think it's very nicely presented. It's photographic. It includes mocked up posters of the 3 films, and it tells us that here is a short history of Marissa Marcel by Sam Barlow. Marissa Marcel is more than just an enigma. Born in France, Marissa moved to London in the late 60s, where she worked as a photographer's model. Her appearance in a soap commercial was spotted by a casting director and led to her being cast from thousands of hopefuls by Arthur Fisher as Matilda in his 1968 Ambrosio. The film was never released. Marcel followed this up with the 1970 movie Minsky, a collaboration with her DP from Ambrosio, John Durick. The movie was never finished. Marcel was not heard from for over 20 years until in 1999 she reappeared to film Two of Everything, reuniting with John Durick, now a successful and acclaimed director. With Durick's death, this movie was also shuttered. Marissa Marcel was never heard from again. In 1968, many thought Marissa would be a huge star, but these days she is largely forgotten. A few dedicated enthusiasts have attempted to find her lost movies and floated their own theories of what happened to Marissa Marcel to no avail. I'll leave the ending of this but suffice it to say that this that you are playing is the DVD box set of the effort to put together a complete history for Marissa Marcel's films. These 3 unfinished or unreleased films are the legacy of this this beautiful actress, and they are presented with behind the scenes footage that give you a really interesting view into who she is and her psychology and her how she lived. And I just think that the way that it is presented is some of the most interesting way I've ever seen this kind of archival footage presented before. And of course, this is a true story.
It's really,
of course, it's a true story.
Yeah, we all know this is a true story. I mean, look at that about page. And yeah, it's incredibly compelling. I mean, that setup alone is very strange and intriguing. How the idea of like a movie star that none of their movies ever actually came out is really interesting on its own. And then you've got a death in there, and you've got a disappearance. Like, there's a lot of intrigue. And then if you're just a fan of Sam Barlow's games, like, okay, there's something going on.
Yeah, there's
right?
there's a couple clear mysteries that are mysteries right off the bat that draw you into this, right? Because there's the clear mystery of, like, it says that these movies were never released, but it only kind of says why. It doesn't tell you why Ambrosio was never released. It tells you that Minsky wasn't released because of a death, but, like, how'd that happen?
Nowadays, I think anytime, like, if a film was almost done and the director dies or whatever, someone's stepping in and finishing it, right? So what happened?
And then there's the mystery of, like, why doesn't she work again for 20 years and then decides to come back for the third film? And why is that never released? That's left as a mystery. And also, of course, Marissa Marcel has disappeared. That's a clear hook. Like, Marissa Marcel is gone. What happened to her that is a really interesting central mystery for this game. And the by implication, this being a Sam Barlow game, that we have an understanding that, like, by combing through all of this archival footage from the 3 films, we're likely to find an answer to those mysteries. Yeah. That's what's so exciting about this.
Well, and what was at first I was like, well, how is watching these old films going to give me any sort of indication as to what happened and why they were canceled or were not released? And that was the first sort of, aha moment in this game for me, is that you're watching clips from the movie, but you're watching scenes from the movies, but oftentimes it's the, like, starting at when the like assistant director will hold up the big, I don't even know
clapboard.
Clapboard. It's like scene 45, take clack. Then it starts. Then you watch the entire scene. Sometimes several 5-minute long movie scenes that are just straight up just a seemingly a scene from a film, and then you'll hear the director say cut, and then you will get, maybe it's done right there, or you'll get upwards of several minutes of, like, what the actors and actresses and scene people and designers and whoever,
multiple takes. Sometimes background footage, like behind the scenes footage. These are people who carry cameras around and are taking video of behind the scenes as they're working on their creative process. Yeah. Videos that are from the pre-production process, things like
table reads,
what is it? What do you call that process where you go, like, looking for sites, like, out looking at sites,
location scouting.
Location scouting. Yeah. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
Storyboarding,
and even just wrap parties, other video that surrounds
video
the
diaries
process of the films.
Yeah,
interviews. And my favorite sequence in the game is a late night talk show interview with. Well, this actually happens a couple of times with different members of the cast. So. All of this comes together to give you not just a picture of the videos themselves, the movies themselves, but of the reason that, like, these mysterious unreleased films might have a little bit of a cultural cachet that has lingered. Like, people wanted to see these. There were famous people involved.
They were intriguing. The first one is based on a novel, a well-known. I mean, it's not really, but it's it's supposedly in universe based on a well-known Gothic novel.
We're supposed to believe that this was going to be a major blockbuster, and
all 3 of these films were going to be a big deal and then never came out. And there's nothing more exciting to a film nerd than an unreleased film, right?
Speaking of, you guys want to see that Batgirl movie?
I want to see that. I couldn't have given less of a shit about
Batgirl.
Marissa Marcel in Batgirl. That's exactly what this is. Like, these are this is like finding, like, The Day the Clown Cried or the dailies from it or something, right? Like, these are background clips of famous missing films and a mysterious central actress who vanished from the scene. That's like a really cool setup that, I mean, like,
the idea of a famous actress who's never had a movie come out is
but like, it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So I think we got to talk a little bit more about how this actually functions, because
let's talk about the first launch experience. What clip did you guys get first?
I don't remember.
I think I got the talk show.
It was definitely a clip from the first. You got the talk show first?
I thought I did, but maybe not.
So I wish I had taken better notes about this specific moment, but when you first launch it, what you see is the full film grid. You see the film grid full of clips.
Yes.
And then I scrolled through it and picked a clip essentially at random, and that is where I started. And
yeah, I think that happened to me too. I remember seeing the full film grid and thinking like I remember that the like Her Story and Telling Lies, they have very specific starting points and they're like well chosen. Here, it does seem to give you a little more flexibility there, and that's awesome.
Awesome, incredibly lateral. You're very free to choose here, and you can see, in that moment, you can see just visually from the film grid how, like, what a gulf of time is encompassed here, because there's a distinct visual look to a film from 1999 versus 1968. Yeah. And you're able to choose whatever you like. And the thing that's incredible here, from that film grid, when you first access the film grid, you're only seeing a tiny number of clips. You're seeing you're seeing, from that initial moment where you come in from everything, you watch a clip and then you come back to the film grid, and you're only able to see the clips that you've seen, right? Suddenly you're left with just the clips that you've watched. And the film grid becomes a experience that's like the experience of directing a film. You are,
which we all have, of course,
assembling. You're assembling these clips in your kind of bin of clips, and you're able to sort and filter and explore them in different ways. You're able to look at things chronologically or in the order that they appear in the films or would have appeared in the films.
And there's the most magical part, though, besides all the organization. It's the discovery of new clips, right? Like, to me, that's the incredible
advancement here. So just for the background here, previous Sam Barlow games have had a text-based experience where you are typing in keywords that you want to search and you want to find. But this has a much more it's a more tactile, fun experience.
Sam Barlow calls this a match cut mechanic. In a filmmaking sense, a match cut is any time where you're cutting between two scenes, but you're cutting on a very similar element. So let's say, for example, that you have a scene in which a character, picks up and regards an apple, and then in the next scene,
how you do when you pick up an apple, you just regard it.
You got to regard it.
You got to regard
and then,
every apple.
The next scene perhaps cuts to an apple hanging on a tree.
Maybe a normal person eating an apple.
Well, I regard them first.
Same, of course. Well, but it's not just the next scene. It's that
I have to stop the podcast for a minute to tell our listeners what's always making me happy, which is Galaxy Crisp or Cosmic Crisp apples.
It's a good crisp.
This is an apple you guys.
The apple evolution, the apple renaissance, really, that we've been experiencing over the last 10 years. I don't think it's enough news coverage.
We are living in the golden age of apples. It's really true. They're really good
absolutely.
These days.
Yeah.
Shane, I've had the Cosmic Crisp. They have them at my local HEB, but they also have a variety of apple called the Envy apple. I don't know if you've had the Envy apple, but I think it's better than Cosmic Crisp. It's got a more of a honey flavor to it. I think it's delicious.
I used to work customer support for a financial company. I talked to this guy one time on the phone who sold apples, and he was just basically laughing the entire call about how much money he's making selling Honeycrisp apples. He was like, I'm selling these things for $6 a pound. You know how much that is? People love Honeycrisp. It has stuck with me.
God, we're all in the wrong business.
I know. This dude was so happy about how much money he was making selling Honeycrisp apples. And I was like, damn, I'm the sucker buying these Honeycrisp apples up because they're fantastic.
Listeners,
good.
did you
They
hear
are
how we
good.
match cut from the discussion of apples in the game to this discussion of the Honeycrisp bracket?
It's a
That's what
perfect
the
example
game is, yeah.
of the way that this mechanic works in the game.
Speaking of
I was
crisp,
explaining a match cut in the filmmaking sense, but here,
Speaking of
they
how
have
we
a-
make our money, guys, we have a Patreon for this podcast.
I
And
ate at a
would
restaurant.
appreciate it if anyone who's listening to this can go to
buy us some
the
apples.
short game. Yeah, buy us some apples. Keep us stocked up in apples. And maybe one day we'll get a sponsorship from Apple.
You're not just watching these clips, you have full control. So you can fast forward, you can reverse, you can pause, and at any moment you can pause and there will be a number of highlightable objects in the scene. Most of the time there's several. Every once in a while I found like a freeze where there was nothing that was highlightable, but for the most part there's usually something, if not dozens of things that you can select. And say someone's regarding an apple, as we all do, as is established, you can pause it, select that apple, and it will take you to another scene that is likely apple related. Or they do some really cool stuff where it's like, sort of tangentially related, or these are all movies that have some connections. So sometimes you'll click on a prop and then that prop is now in one of the other movies. So suddenly you're watching a scene from one of the other movies. And at least my experience with this game has been sort of an endless cycle of watching scenes, reversing through them to watch them again, maybe pausing it and seeing like, that's an interesting item, or why did the camera dart left a little bit right there? Let me pause right at let me go frame by frame until I get exactly to where the camera has darted for a moment, and there may be some interesting object there that will now freeze, select that object, and it's going to take me to a new scene that I probably have never seen before, or even to a scene that I've already seen, but with 30 seconds more at the beginning. Or I'm coming in at the end of the scene and now I see 30 seconds further than I did before.
And you'll come in the middle of these scenes. You can always run back to the beginning of the scene if you want, or fast forward. But because this is such a fluid experience, it was very, very rare that I was jumping into a scene, jumping to the beginning of the clip entirely and watching it beginning to end that way. It's much more.
That's where we're different. I really don't want to miss anything. I one of my favorite things that they've done here is in the UI. I'm playing this on PC, and the keyboard buttons that are being used here, the arrow keys and then the letter I and O, that matches how nonlinear video editors are. And when it's bringing you into the game, it explicitly tells you, like, we're presenting these assorted clips from these unfinished movies in the way that a movie maker would have interacted with them in the time, and that's their way of saying, like, this UI is like a video editor's dashboard.
It does
UI.
sort of feel like that. I played on a controller.
I and O, I want to talk about the controller too, but the I/O thing is specifically the in and out point in a video editor, and it's a really nice touch that they use that. I do wish that it was possible to reassign some things here, because I am very used to Final Cut Pro, where the job done by the arrow keys here would have been done by J, K, and L, which are directly under I and O. Those are the shuttle keys to move you through a clip. I wish I could do that. You can't reassign those things here. But the way that they recommend playing this game, and I actually recommend as well, is with a keyboard, not with a keyboard, but with a gamepad and with headphones. And I think actually both of those are very important for this game.
Yeah, I had a gamepad. I wish I would have been using headphones, because there's a lot of this is obviously a visual medium. You're watching these videos, and it's a lot of this game is sort of observing the scene, taking it all in, looking for new and interesting objects. But the audio is critical as well. There are a lot of
extremely critical
audio, like arguably more important, at least for exploring and unlocking new things. There are audio cues that I don't know how you would ever identify. Like, this game has subtitles, which is very, very nice. But if you were playing
on by default,
if you were playing this game without sound, I don't think that you could.
You may never be. I mean, you may never be able to truly complete this game without sound.
Yeah, I don't. Think
but
so.
I mean, why would you play a game about watching video without sound? I think that would be pretty ludicrous.
Well, to be fair, from an accessibility standpoint, I do think that the game
subtitles and everything.
It also has
some of the most vital sounds are also reproduced via like haptics and.
That's what I was gonna say. It rumbles. Yeah. It rumbles, but I don't know that you would like the audio cue is becomes increasingly apparent.
Pretty hard to replace that.
Yeah.
So, just speaking of while we are still just talking about like the physicality of the game, like they do recommend a controller. In fact, in the press release thing here, they say we recommend headphones and a controller for the most immersive experience. Sticks and clicks go a long way to evoking some of the mechanical metaphors here, and I agree with that. They did, I think, a really good job of mapping these controls to a gamepad. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like, you can use either stick or you can use the triggers on your controller to fast forward and rewind in a way that feels really natural. You can press L3 or R3, like clicking the sticks, to get that in and out point type of thing that Shane was referring to earlier. So if you click your left stick, you jump to the beginning of the clip with a nice little rewind, sound and video effect that happens very quickly. And then you can use the left and right arrows on your D-pad to step by frame, which becomes pretty important as you're trying to catch small details. It's really, really effective. And I think they did. What's incredible about this is like both of the other games in this sort of loose trilogy, like Shane mentioned earlier, were really revolving around using a keyboard or being able to type things. They've figured out a way to make a game that does the same things as Her Story, but can be played entirely on a controller and feels better for it. Like, this isn't something where like you have to type into a interface with a gamepad. This match cut mechanic where you are, basically skipping between clips using visual language instead of the spoken language is genius and hella effective. And
it's also only possible because the directing and the video element of this game is so far ahead of
so much
anything
richer
Barlow has done before. Like, this is directed from the ground up for this mechanic. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, candles are all over the first movie, or that you see a knife at some pivotal point in all three movies. These are considerations, and also the video is designed in such a way that there's a very minimal number of like extraneous noun objects or just random people's face, because of course faces are one of the most useful objects that you can click to see match cut, because you'll want to follow a character through their story. But like the cinematography both feels perfectly natural and very convincingly mimics these various different eras visual style and like cinematography and movie language. But then also it's really tight. It's really spare. You really only see what you need to see to be able to work with the footage in this match cut mechanic of being able to click from object to similar object.
Well, there's a number of things that I think make it work so well. With text-based, you have to do a little bit of work in your own mind to think of like, what word am I going to search for? And obviously like a lot of words are provided for you, and there's a lot of obvious keywords that are said a lot, but you still have to kind of connect that dot and type it out and search for it. And you may search for words that don't really give you much of a response or just lead you back to the same thing you've already seen. Whereas this game, everything is being presented to you. No matter what you click on, you're going to get to something. Now, if you play the game for a while,
you don't like, it's not like the search thing where you get a list. Like you might see a flower and you click on it and it's going to take you to another seemingly random clip that includes a flower, but you're not going to get an exhaustive list of every shot of a flower in the entire 3-movie trilogy.
Sam Barlow compared this mechanic in an interview to Pokemon Snap. He said in Pokemon Snap, you move through
That's
a
so
linear
good.
level, you notice cool things, and you try and take photos to get points for it. Sometimes
This game might be
by
the
doing-
opposite of Pokemon Snap, and I love that he
by
is
doing things at the right time, you might see or unlock something that
That's so
you
funny.
hadn't necessarily on a previous trip.
I had not heard
So
that
in
before. What a
Immortality, we're giving you this moviola, which is the interface, where you can sit and watch these sequences and rewind and find that perfect frame where you can perform a headshot, and then it will magically catapult you into a new cool moment and create some interesting story dynamic.
I think that a critical element to this too, and I probably shouldn't be impressed by this at this point in 2022, but the smoothness and the lack of loading that you bounce in between every scene with like no drops. You're watching a film about a gothic monk. You see a cup, you click on the cup, it does a little zoom in on the cup, zooms out, and now you're in an entirely new scene that is set in the 90s, and everything is totally different. It's all full motion
now it's
video.
a Starbucks cup or
and
whatever.
and it's a full motion video, fully directed acting, incredible. And then you see like, oh, there's a knife on the table, and you click on that, and now you're over at an entirely. It is seamless. It's seamless, and it's fun.
This is partially because all this video, like I'm very used to all my video being a streaming experience now. All this video is downloaded as part of the game download. How
25
big
gigs.
is this? 25 gigs. This is a huge game.
I was very surprised whenever I loaded it up on Steam, because like, oh, it's new Sam Barlow. It's probably like these games are dense, but 26 gig is wild.
It's a lot. While we're talking about the experience of sort of flowing and skipping trippingly from clip to clip, I want to share something that Sam Barlow and their team included in the notes that they shared along with the review copy. Maybe a little more highbrow than the comparison to Pokemon Snap, but he included a paragraph from from a description of an exhibition by J.G. Ballard, his Atrocity exhibition. He included the original clip, but then he also paraphrased it to specifically refer to the game. And so this is a sort of a paraphrase of a J.G. Ballard quote about experiencing a sort of art that has this sort of random exploration element to it. He says, players who find themselves daunted by the unfamiliar narrative structure of Immortality, far simpler than it seems at first glance, might try a different approach. Rather than watching from beginning to end as in a conventional movie, simply scrub through the footage until something catches your eye. If a character or item seems interesting, click them and be teleported, creating your own path via images that resonate in an intriguing way. Fairly soon, I hope, the fog will clear and the underlying narrative will reveal itself. In effect, you will be playing the game in the way it was written. And I like that quote a lot because it sort of that's a really ambitious thing. This idea that you can take this, Sam Barlow's done this before in a sense, but like this idea that you can take this this orderly chronological narrative and essentially just experience it as a gestalt, sort of encompass it all in a sort of a random way, piecing it together in your head, not like puzzle pieces where you're specifically putting one next to the other and seeing exactly how they fit. Maybe there's some of that, but mostly you're just sort of taking it in and you're gaining a sort of a understanding of it as a whole in a way that is really, really cool and feels like you're playing with the thing rather than experiencing it like you would with a film.
Mm-hmm. I'm most reminded of my mind is going back to the novel Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. There's a practice that he has in there called Zen navigation, which is that rather than using conventional methods of wayfinding like a map, the Zen navigator looks for someone who looks like they know where they're going and then follows them. And that the result is that you get where you are supposed to be and not where you intended to go. And so that is something that I think you can pursue in this game.
I was really enjoying the physicality of this game that we've been talking about here, and And I went over to Molly, who was like watching a show. I was like, I got to show you this thing. It's so cool. You can like pull up these clips and fast forward and rewind and pause and freeze and zoom. And she's like, so it does what a VHS does. You can very lovingly, of course. But I was like, no, you don't get it. You got to hold it. You got to try it, because it is. There is a degree of like explaining this where it's like, oh, cool. You can watch videos and fast forward them and rewind them. But
you can click on things and take you to other things. It's like,
so to be clear, if this sounds this sounds boring, which that was really eye opening to me when I went to show it and was like, okay, yeah, when you put it that way, it sounds. I think
boring.
Like
his other games, it might be a really good game to play co-op with somebody, sitting on the couch with you, taking it in with you, and like giving you ideas about what rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just sort of hand the controller to somebody, mid thing, it's essentially the same as Netflix, right? It's you hit play, you hit pause, it does the thing.
I found this game distinctly hard to pitch to people, and so. I think when it comes to Sam Barlow's games, like when I first experienced the very first one, Her Story, I thought, well, this is going to be really a hard sell, and it's going to be really divisive, and people are going to be split on what they think of it. And what surprised me was it wasn't. People really genuinely seemed to love Her Story just across the board. And I think that's going to be true here too.
Well, I think Her Story and everything, but part of what Her Story was really compelling on was just the performance of the lead actress. Like, she was compelling to watch, and if you're a fan of any sort of media like this, like just watching those scenes was interesting. And I think the same thing with this. Like, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but these are like.
These are good movies. Yeah, these are movies I would watch.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're good movies because I think
I don't know.
I think part of it is that at least the Ambrosio. I think part of it is they're a little campy, a little B filmy, a little bit like over the top. Or at least some of the performances are intentionally that. But it's all like you're watching 30-second clips, 1 minute, 2 minute clips from films. And the actors all throughout are really, really good and really compelling. And you have no idea what's really happening. But I found myself like immediately caring about whatever scene was going on, trying to figure out what it is. Where does this sit in the broader movie? Sam Barlow is obviously not just a compelling writer because all of this is written and pre-planned. But I think a pretty good director. Like, these are good performances, which had to be really strange as an actor to perform because it's all, segmented and weird. And they were enjoyable. And the cinematography, I don't know if he does his own cinematography, if he has a director of photography, but like, I was really impressed.
Yeah, he came to this style of filmmaking from working with actors in mocap. Like his previous, he had a AAA career. He did one of the Silent Hill games and like directed actors for
there's a mocap
cut scenes and mocap scenes and stuff. And he came to film through that, which is a really interesting and odd approach. But like, I want to push back a little bit, Nate. I think these are all good movies, and that's one of the things that made this work for me. Is that like these are like, maybe I wouldn't go like singing the praises of Ambrosio, the film, the 1968 film based on a Gothic novel about a priest, and his temptation. But it is a spot on 1968 like Hammer Films kind of vibe it's like not shot on location, shot on sound stages, shot with it looks like a 1968 film, it sounds like a 1968 film, and it's a believable movie, but also there are things in it that are really interesting. And I would watch Ambrosio. I really would. I think it's got some really interesting stuff, especially towards the end of the movie. And the other two movies are also great. Like, you get the sense that, like, okay, they're on a turning point. You know, the third movie. So we're not going to talk in depth about these movies because we're saving most of that for after the spoiler break. I'm going to try to keep the plot details of the three films mostly out of this episode. But like the first film, Ambrosio, great. Sort of 1968. It feels like a little bit of a holdover of like early 60s, like gothic horror, gothic campy stuff. Very spot on. But then you see that, so Marissa leaves that film and works with her DP, the director of photography on that film, working under this famous director whose name is escaping me at the moment. He and Marissa team up to make a movie together that's going to be his first film as a director, and it's called Minsky, the second movie, and it's it feels like a 1970s movie. So in a way, even though it's only a couple of years later, it feels like they're on the avant-garde of a new style of filmmaking that's hitting in the 70s. So lots of changes. Suddenly they're shooting on location. Suddenly they're making a film that's not about, gothic priests in Spain in whatever year that was supposed to be set in. Instead, it's like a street film. They've got like people taking drugs and cursing and having sex and whatnot. Not that there wasn't some sex in Ambrosio. There's a lot of tits in this game, guys. A lot of tits.
Pardon me, sir.
And it's a different kind of film. But it also seems like it's the kind of movie, like, if you're interested in these sort of 70s grungy cop dramas, it would have been a pretty good one, I think, actually. The script that they've got, all the scenes that you get to see are well written. The characters the actors are doing a really good job. It's an interesting movie, but you also get that sort of behind the scenes stuff. And then you get that 20-year gap, that mysterious 20-year gap in Marissa Marcel's career. And the third movie feels like a 90s or late 90s like teen movie or something.
Yeah,
it's more of just a thriller, I think.
It's like a pop star centered thriller about a woman and her a pop star and her body double sort of trading places, and it's got all the hallmarks of a 90s thriller. I think all of them are interesting enough movies that, like, even if there wasn't the central mystery of like what happened to Marissa Marcel and what is the strange backstory going on around and behind all of this stuff, and it is stranger than you think. There's a lot of strange stuff in this. Even without all of that, I would have been intrigued just to be able to see more of the story of these films. I think they hold up.
Well, the mechanic of bouncing between them, getting little bits and pieces, the smoothness of it, how quickly you go from one movie to another, makes them all feel distinct and interesting. And so I don't mean any disrespect when I say, that I think that these movies may not have necessarily been good movies. Because I see what you're saying. Like, I wanted to know what's going on with this priest. Will he? Won't he? But like the like, it's of its time, where it's like the over dramatized scenes, wailing into the camera, brandishing a knife against a painting of Mother Mary. It's all like, I think if you were actually watching this movie end to end with none of the context of the mystery of the movie, you'd be like, this
maybe my tolerance is different. I've watched a lot of like Hammer horror and like old Vincent Price movies and stuff, and I love those things. So like this hit like one of those for me. A style of gothic. It's not exactly like, I wouldn't say that Ambrosio, there are definitely horror elements in this. In fact, Sam Barlow like came out and said early that he made this partially as a horror game, which is a really interesting thing, that it doesn't wear on its sleeve, even though he's said it in a number of places. But like it has these like gothic horror elements to it that I was really into.
Yeah, it's getting hard to talk about without going into our spoilers section, which we are holding for our next episode for a variety of reasons. First off, I have hit the credits on this, but there's a lot of content that I still haven't seen. I pretty much have I pretty much have seen everything in Ambrosio, and Minsky was never completed, but I feel like I've seen pretty close to most of the footage from Minsky. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface on 2 of everything. Not to mention, there's quite a well of miscellaneous content outside of the scope of those 3 films, and so I'm still making my way through. It is. If you were to play this game just to the credits, and I know neither of you guys have hit the credits yet, but
I feel like I'm very close.
Anyone
where
who
I'm at right now, like I've been spending most of my time trying to like unearth things in the first 2 films.
There is a mountain of content here that is very optional and is going to be, it's your experience of this game is going to depend so much on your interest in these 3 films and the assorted additional content that goes along with them. So I think it's enough for this episode for us to just say that this is one of our most strongly recommended titles and possibly game of the year. So far for me it is. I
would go a little farther. I would say this is I haven't even hit credits on it, and I think this is an absolute work of genius.
I agree.
I think it's like, I thought Her Story was good. Or not good. I thought it was great. I thought it was brilliant. I thought Telling Lies was even better in many ways. This is the best thing he's ever done, and this might be one of the best games ever made. There aren't, we're coming to this like trying to hit embargo date, and so we haven't seen reviews from other outlets, but I'm confident that this is going to be a ton of people's game of the year. The one review that's out already is Edge Magazine. They hit a print date, and this got a 10 out of 10 from Edge Magazine. Only 24 games in the entire history of that magazine have gotten a 10 out of 10. The last one was Elden Ring. This is, I think, going to be the best game of the year without question.
It's, I don't mean this to say this to like spark the frustrating debate of like what is or isn't a game, but like this is so much more than just like a game. You know what I mean? I feel like just the interaction of the films, the obscurity of what you're actually even doing. I think I was like 2 hours in, and I had messaged the group like, I don't know what's happening and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I absolutely love this. That feeling carried for a long time is just so compelling. I don't even know how to explain. I feel like we've just spent an hour talking about this, and we've really only scratched the surface about just how.
Well, that's why we have a whole second episode planned. Well, I have one last thing that I feel like I want to add here, and I know this is a spoiler-free episode. But I think this is okay to include if you needed a little extra inducement. Maybe you've been hearing all of this and you say, well, but I'm not interested in a French film star from the 1960s. There's a thing that they put in the reviewer guide here. They provide a lot of advice for players, a lot of which I thought was really useful. The kind of thing like the quote I mentioned earlier. But they have one thing at the end that I want to include here just in case folks need a little extra push. And that is, they say at the end here, one last piece of advice about this game. Be warned, we think it might be haunted.
We have not talked at all about the like next layer of this game that is going on, and that is intentional, but just know that
it might be haunted.
There is so much that's why we're doing an entire other episode of spoilers, because
I haven't felt this strongly about the like spoiler, like having so much to talk about before we hit even stuff that I would consider like the meat of the game. Since maybe Inscription, like in a way, the like jaw on the floor reveals of Inscription. That's here too in a way. There are some absolute jaw on the floor reveals that make you reevaluate the entire nature of this game that we haven't touched on yet. This will be total spoiler stuff.
Yeah.
So
check it out.
Yeah. Cannot wait to hear more people talking about this game, playing this in preview was hard because I kept wanting to talk about it to literally everyone. Oh man,
how would I even explain it?
Yeah. Once again, thank you so much to Half Mermaid for providing code on this one.
What half of the mermaid do you think they're referring to?
I want to say it's half mermaid, half man. So that you have
the top half
of a mermaid and the bottom half,
half of a man. What a strange creature! Exactly.
I think it's just bisected right at the waist, so it's just a fishtail, and you're just assuming that it's a mermaid.
That was half of a mermaid once for sure. Well, I think that looking at the clock here, I don't think we have time for what's making us happy this week. So I will simply say that's what's making us happy this week is this game, Immortality, which I cannot wait to start playing more immediately after we get off of this call. So listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. That's where you'll find all the links to all the things, including our searchable show notes page, a form where you can submit games that you recommend for the show. You can also tweet at us at _shortgame. You can also find us on Patreon. You're going to want to talk about this game once you play it. And what better way to do that?
The worst part about this embargo is not being able to talk about this game with our Patreon subscribers in the Discord. I can't wait to see what everybody thinks.
Yes, the moment the embargo is up, I'm creating a channel for this game, and we are going to be talking about it, making heavy use of spoiler tags. So if you are playing this game and you want a place to talk about it, join us on our Discord. You can get onto the Discord by being a patron of the show on Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame. And if you support us at even $1 a month, which we appreciate every one of our patrons, you can also support at higher levels too if you'd like. There's no cap. You can send us however much money you would like. But if you support us at even just the $1 a month level, then you immediately get access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games that we're playing. And we're going to be talking about Inscription for weeks, I guarantee.
You said Inscription.
I said Inscription. Immortality. Sorry.
There is, I don't know what the dollar amount, but there is certainly a dollar amount that if we get to, Reagan will recreate every scene of Ambrosio with him playing every part. So let's get to that number.
I'm already doing it. You just haven't seen it.
Well, we'll release it. I assumed you were doing it. So.
Release the Reagan cut.
Yeah.
Of Ambrosio. So you listeners, thank you once again for joining us. That's all of the things. You can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. Shane, where can people find you?
On Twitter at 8BitShane.
And Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. Join us back here next week for Deep Dark Spoilers.